like a broken doll in pieces as I took the fall. For you, you don't jump, you left me free falling like space jump, burning up in the atmosphere of life. Well, I sound like a philosopher, but I'm a fool, a suffer rocker, as I let you in my heart that one last time. I had enough, made up my mind. I'm gonna get up and out and wild. I love myself today, not like yesterday. I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm gonna be okay. I love myself today, not like yesterday. Take another look at me now, 'cause it's your last look forever. Well, look at you, you're all puffed up in a big red truck, but you're out of luck this time. Well, that's tough, 'cause I'm on fire, too hot to touch, with a chat room full of lovers on the line. Gonna step right up, still shine my soul. I'm gonna be proud and loud and out of control. I love myself today, not like yesterday. I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm gonna be okay. I love myself today.
Welcome, Biff. There is no day that I have started that is better than today in a long time. And it's because of that song I'm speaking to you. Welcome, Biff. It's what a pleasure to be connected and to have a conversation with you today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's a delight for me to be here.
Well, it's such a pleasure. Now, we just heard your amazing song, I Love Myself Today. People actually already wrote in, someone said, this is excellent, amazing way, Tell us. Now, you wrote that song a little while ago. Tell us about that song. And, you're listening to that today. What does that song say to you today?
Well, the thing about it, a song like that is, and why it becomes kind of anthemic, is it gives people an opportunity to sing along with you. I think the one thing that's really fantastic about everyone who is a music fan, they love to sing along. They love to sing the words, I do, you do, to anything that we like. But what it does is it really gives people an opportunity to repeat a phrase. And I think I always say it like mantra. This is something that is a repeated phrase. If you say it often enough, you're gonna believe it and you're gonna feel it. I always use the reference of Snoopy dancing because that is the visual. I think that really happens for people. People forget their problems, their condition, not just with my song, but with any, work of art. If you love, Chopin, when you hear it, you're lost in it. If you love a painting, you become immersed in gazing at it, you forget, and I think that that's very true with music. And I Love Myself Today is a good mantra.
Well, you also, like I was just wondering, I was listening to that, songs like that, just gets to me so immediately. So inspiring. What's inspiring to you today? Like, what's in the context of everything that's going on? What makes you feel that?
Well, I think that a lot of people, maybe they already know this, maybe you already know this, but optimism and having a positive outlook is actually very, very easy to do because like complaining, it's a habit to be positive. And I blame my mother completely, who is the most joyful little positive person in the world. And, always looking at the bright side, literally looking at the bright side and finding the silver lining are almost like our goals for the day. How can we find the bright side in absolutely everything? From the toilet not working to realizing when you're in the shower that you actually have running water, like really simple little things that are just things that you notice, and how can you not make those a habit, because they're little reminders that just carry you through your whole day. Every day is like that, and it should be.
Mm. Well, it's just a great reminder of how important that is. Also, just makes it sort of a great segue into why we even started this whole Change for Good thing 8 weeks ago or something, because we wanted, in spite of everything else that's going on, we just really wanted to create a place of community and inspiration for people who were in the world of social change. So you're not just sitting at home, you're actually having the opportunity to hear what's going on and listen to some remarkable people. And that's why one of the things that we've had some incredible people, as you know, on this over the last number of weeks, but we have, and this is the first time we've had someone from the creative world, like you. And that's what I'm so excited to having this conversation today. And also wanted to just remind everybody listening today, it's not just my conversation with Bif. I encourage everybody to send in questions. You can send it on Zoom if you have a question. As Bif and I are chatting, please send it in. We're going to try and get to as many as we can. And we're just going to continue this conversation. So the other thing I just thinking about with you is, in terms of your work as an artist over the last, and of course you're at home, we're at home, how is this contributing to your own creativity today? Or is it different than it was? Like, how are you processing all this stuff?
Well, I mean, for me, being a self-employed artist my entire adult life, basically, a lot of things are the same, in so much that when we're working, we're here, we're at home, and wherever we live. We lived in Vancouver. I lived there for 30 years, and I've moved here in the last 2 years. Nothing really has changed. The only problem with my job is that ultimately, unless I'm putting butts in seats, right, I'm not getting paid. And so for us, like a lot of artists or authors or public speakers, or hairdressers or tattoo artists or line cooks, a lot of people can't physically be at their physical job. So that's a problem. And trying to remain undaunted and to remain productive and do something differently, to still work with that end goal in mind. I call it keeping the eyes on the prize. Eventually we'll be doing those things again. So in the meantime, work on my writing that I am procrastinating on because it's hard on my brain, or working on a painting, or working on new mixes for songs that we have. We have to create our own work. Like they say, create your own luck. It's a popular saying because it's true. It resonates with people. And the same is true for creating your own work. You can't be daunted, and you can't lament what is. You just have to work toward what your dreams are, regardless of what that looks like.
Another thing I know that you've talked about, which I think is a great kind of mantra as well, which is living loudly.
Yes.
And so, what is, I think that maybe it's a time when many people think that, well, it's hard. How do you live loudly, today? So how are you living loud?
Well, I think that could mean anything, regardless. For me, because I still have my eyesight, which is, as I get older, is starting to become a little exciting for me because I need glasses. But while I still am delighted by things, I love color. I love bright colors. I love very busy patterns, things that they are thrilling. And I think that's one way we can live loudly, is our surroundings. Sometimes we can't, especially now, we can't get out and travel. So buy a travel book, get some picture books of that place that you want to go. Literally, it sounds simple and it might even sound silly, but ultimately it's still equally as inspiring. It still makes your heart feel really good looking at those pictures of Marrakesh, or looking, do it loudly, do things with a little more passion, do them with deliberation. Same with cooking. I think that it's very creative. A lot of people order out. I think that I've only actually eaten in 1 or 2 restaurants ever in the 2 years that I've lived here, because we cook every day. We love bright colored fruits and vegetables, and we make elaborate salads every day.
Nice.
Because that's how we eat, but it's also part of our desire to create the life we want to, and that's every avenue, every area of our life, including what we put in our body.
Totally. Now we've already got a whole bunch of questions here, and this is the hardest and most frustrating part of these conversations. It goes by so quickly. There's so much to talk about, but I do want to get to a couple things that people are wanting to ask you. So someone, Joanne says, what brought you to Toronto and how does it compare to Vancouver for you?
Oh boy, we could talk minimum a half an hour about that. A lot of my friends from Vancouver, both work friends and my personal life friends, basically treated me like I defected. They basically were absolutely appalled, 100%, not even exaggerating. They were appalled that I would move to Toronto after living in Vancouver for so long. But for us, I just found, as I was doing more acoustic shows with my guitar player husband, and as we had just gotten married in 2016, we both had apartments. Obviously, we were gonna try and get something together. And really, it was, for us, we could get a place to live here 30% cheaper. Okay, that was a big reality. And now I think, I can't say, because I'm not an expert on real estate or anything, or renting, but I think that it's still, even though people think it's really expensive here, it's still cheaper than there, which is horrifying. I don't know. And also with working, as far as my book publisher was here, for us to be able to perform and do acoustic shows as well as rock and roll shows. It's just a bigger population. The cities are closer together. It just worked out. Plus my manager of 27 years moved from Paris to Oakville. So then us being in Toronto was closer than Vancouver to Paris. And just all of the stars aligned, all the planets aligned for us to come here. And we love it so much. We love it absolutely. I have winter tires for the first time. And, it's been serendipitous. Living here is so different. The demographic is different. The community social needs are different. It's just like, it's amazing. It's been really interesting. Very, very interesting.
And, I think one of the things that's interesting about this conversation at this time is you've got, I think obviously people want to hear about you and your experience and your influence as an artist. And also, I'm interested in talking about, of course, your impressions of what's going on in the world right now. You were talking about cost of living. One of the things that just came to mind when you were saying that is, I don't know about you, I've been out and I don't think I've ever seen as many tents, like people living in tents. I was down on Queen Street yesterday. We were walking along, and literally on the sidewalk, there are a number of people living in tents. And it's just one of those things that it really appears that, I feel so fortunate. There's, of course, a lot of people who are vulnerable, and they're even more vulnerable to that. Well, what are you seeing, in terms of how and how vulnerability is kind of just surrounding us today?
Well, I think that there have always been, in any city or town, there are always going to be people that live in a society in a variety of tiers, if you will. There's always going to be people who have multiple barriers. Okay, those are also economic and everything. Those vulnerabilities and those barriers already existed. COVID-19 has created obviously an emergency situation where we are really taking notice, basically, because this is an emergency. And I think the key moving forward, and that's really what it's about, and that's what, like for example, your change for good, I think a change that needs to be implemented. And I always say, you know, I'm an artist. You know, I am not a politician or anything like that. It's just my opinion. But I just really believe that moving forward, it's an opportunity for us to remember this emergency situation that's happening. And we are trying to navigate healthcare for these vulnerably housed or precariously housed people. Moving forward, let's not do it again in an emergency. Let's work on prevention. Let's work on, you know, making sure that that precariousness and people experiencing that are not, they're not going to have to anymore. Moving forward, let's change the system. Let's try to work towards changing the system and bettering the opportunities, making more available housing. You know, I mean, I could go on, but I just think that even though a lot of people are noticing it now, it's always been there. It has always been there. And if you don't see it, you don't notice. And I think that people are very busy. People work very hard for very little. They have kids. Everyone lives check to check. And I think that's something that people realized as they saw restaurants going out of business immediately. They saw businesses, you know, struggling immediately. People were immediately impacted. And that really sends a message that every single person, every family, regardless of what the appearances are, we're already living check to check. So if that's the truth, then how can we not as a society look at those who are less fortunate and have the light bulb go on? I mean, that's really all you can hope out of this, is that compassion grows with awareness.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I mean, you mentioned you're an artist, but you're also an activist. And I feel like whether it's, you know, John Lennon saying give peace a chance, or, you know, the messages that you're sharing, I think there's an important contribution you're making to social change. And I think people would also love to hear about, I would love to hear about, how did you get involved as an activist? I mean, you're someone who's had lived experience, you've been through cancer, you've had all kinds of things in addition to your musical and artistic side of life. But what brought you to activism?
Well, you know, I think that for me, as an 18-year-old girl who was, you know, had basically dropped out of university to join a band, and you know, we were on welfare, not for long, but we had to go through that system in Manitoba because we were, you know, a couple unfortunate circumstance, and people find themselves in that situation. So I know firsthand how hard it was to access that. And I did, even at that time, you know, as a healthy 18-year-old girl, I didn't have as many barriers as many people did. So having that experience and awareness going through my adult life was one thing. Going through cancer treatment was the greatest education I could ever have hoped for as far as the healthcare system. Now, at the time I went through cancer treatment, I was in British Columbia, which may or may not be a little different from Ontario or other provinces. But just that experience introduced me to just how unbelievably difficult it would be for somebody who has barriers, or if they live in a rural or remote community, for them to try and access care, basic care. never mind mammography. But I could talk about it for hours.
No, well, for sure. And are there like what is close in terms of your own work as an activist today? Like what are you personally involved in now? I know you've had animal rights issues. There's all kinds of things that you've done, but what are you most focused on today in terms of social change?
Well, honestly, I think that I have, and again, I was kind of introduced to palliative care volunteering when I was in cancer treatment myself, and that really was almost like a calling in a way, because it made me it was a great education. I love healthcare. I just do, and I loved the hospital environment, but I quickly learned where the needs were for many patient populations, if you will. And now today with palliative care, it is a big focus of my personal time. And moving to Toronto immediately around the same time, Journey Home Hospice was opening their doors, and that of course was something I was introduced to when I first arrived here. So it is a passion of mine, and I think everyone should learn about it. And it's the only hospice and palliative program for people who are experiencing homelessness in Toronto, and it's just the work they do is nothing short of miraculous work.
Well, thanks for saying that. And I actually hadn't heard about their work before, but we've, since we chatted and you told us about them, we've looked into them. I just wanted to say to I think you know about this, but to everyone here, the Journey Home Hospice, I believe, is a program, an organization called St. Elizabeth Health, SE Health.
Yes, Elizabeth.
SE Health, right? And so we're just so happy that in honor and to recognize your contribution to the world and your participation in this, in Change for Good today, we've got an objective to raise $100,000 to ensure that all of the 26,000 seniors who are in the care of Journey Home Hospice and SE Health are able to get the protection they need in terms of masks that they do not have. So we've got 26,000 seniors who are at risk today.
Yes.
And the Impact Foundation for Social Change exists to create employment for people who are vulnerable, but also in this case, we are making sure that masks are available to people who need them. And so anyone who is able and interested in contributing to that can do that at impactfoundation.ca/face-masks. If you go to impactfoundation.ca, do it and help us get the masks to the people that need them.
That's right.
There's so many, right?
It's amazing, and it's hard for us to understand and even believe that there's a shortage of masks. I mean, it sounds like it's out of a movie, and at some point people are, they can't believe it. But we couldn't even buy masks for ourselves, not even like simple little cloth masks. So imagine working in healthcare and not having any.
Totally. I want to come back to a question that someone has asked here, and kind of references what you were saying before. I know it may be too early to know, but for people like you, an audience is important, and we don't have that now. Clearly, the music industry and other creative industries are impacted tremendously. Do you have a sense of where that's going for you personally, in terms of how you may be changing the way you do what you do in lieu of being in public, or where's your sense of where it's going?
Well, I'm, of course, as an optimist, I'm very hopeful, and so we had tours booked this spring, and I had a couple of speaking engagements that were booked. Everything, absolutely 100% of everything was off the table. Right. And that goes for all bands. And So I think that things can be postponed, which they were for us, but those postponements keep getting pushed back and pushed back. And as time goes on, it is a big question, like, you know, how is it going to be possible? How will it be possible to socially distance? I can assure you it is not possible in a mosh pit.
No.
Period, the end. And as much as we can sit here and bemoan the times and be upset, the truth is it is not possible. It is not physically possible. So then it begs the question, what do? You know, does everyone wear masks? Possibly, because again, like singing along with I Love Myself Today, when you're singing, you're exhaling, you're breathing. I mean, it's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, you know, it is, as they say, you have to take everything, A, as it comes, and B, with a grain of salt. But you just really have to remain undaunted and try and adapt. I think that our best skill set right now really does include adaptability and being flexible and just, you know, as they say, taking it on the chin and keep moving forward. That's all we can do. We had a single come out in February, and we have a release schedule with a new record coming out this fall. That hasn't really changed. And again, on one hand, to everyone's benefit is digital media. You know, as much as bands and artists kind of will always tell you and reassure you that it's not a revenue source anymore. But the truth is, it hasn't been for some time. There are a lot of bands right now and artists who are, you know, making money doing their performances online. And I say to them what I always say, which is, God bless. And that's all. You can just like keep going. That's all we can really do. Keep working and keep striving, you know, and hoping that, you know, by the end of the year, maybe things will be different.
Well, I know you've done a one-person show before, or you know, like a play, I think it was. Maybe another one of those.
We were very lucky. So those are the Songs and Stories tours. Yeah. And so what we've done is basically we have enshrouded a book reading into a 3-hour acoustic concert. And there's truly nothing I enjoy more. Maybe the occasional stage dive. But truly, this is, for me, it's just really a lot of fun. We were very, very lucky. We had a small tour right before. So our last date, I believe, was up in the Ottawa area in Burnstown. I think it was the 8th of March was our last one. And I just think that we were very lucky, and the audiences were very lucky. And I meet everyone after the show. I sign books, I do selfies, and I mean, I'm a hugger. I mean, that was never a question. And thank goodness we were able to get that in. You know, I feel so happy that we were able to do that. And I look forward to doing it again. It's my favorite way to tour.
Right on. Grant has a question for you. Skipping back a little bit, but Grant, his question is, who are your influences to encourage you to be a singer and an artist?
Oh boy, well, that's a good question, but it's you know, I never wanted to be a singer ever. I still don't. And I'm living proof that you don't have to know how to sing to be a singer. I wanted to be a ballerina until I was 10 years old. I was in ballet. I did 13 years of ballet. We were performing arts kids in my family. I have 2 sisters. We were all in piano and dance. And I started doing readers theater in the 6th grade. So I started using my voice, and I loved jokes, and I loved performing. I loved the stage, and that just was really natural for me. So I went into theater when I was in university, and met these guys in my theater class who had mohawks and had a band, and well, as they say, the rest is history. But it was kind of an accident for me to get into singing, but it was a great vehicle for my poetry, which all turned into lyric writing, and I just love it. I could not have even dreamt of a better job to have had all these years.
So great. So I have another inspiration question for you, which is Grant asked about inspiration or music. So turning back to social change, who are the social change leaders or organizations? Or you mentioned, of course, Journey Home Hospice, but like, are there people who you look at and you think, in terms of their work, in terms of social change, wow, that's amazing? Or who are you inspired by in that area?
Oh, so many people. I mean, I grew up in a household where my parents were civil rights activists from America. So, knowing their history, and my father was a dentist, but his master's was in public health. So his, they were basically, I accused him of being a bleeding heart socialist my whole life. And we had lots of great debates and jokes. But the truth is, every Christmas in my house, we watched Gandhi. We were as kids, as teenagers, we were tortured with, with Gandhi and with this movie. But truly, I have to look to all of the change that some of these leaders have always done, in the world, in the big picture of things. And it's easy to find people in our local communities that are doing the same work. They're working on behalf of the poor, and really, that's a broad brush for me to paint. But really, I think that anyone who is in the community and working to help better the community. Right here in Toronto, there's an organization I love called Building Roots, and for $5 you can get vulnerable seniors a bag of fruit and vegetables. It's like a really simple thing, but it's profound, and the impact it has, not just in that community, but in the people who are donating and the people who are talking about it. I think it's absolutely imperative that we get behind these grassroots organizations that are doing so much good in these small pockets, because with enough of us bleeding hearts, we're gonna eventually make long-lasting changes.
We have another question here, but this is for someone who's an artist themselves. What can or could they do to contribute to change in the way you're describing?
Well, everything you can do. Every part of your art, because if you're a poet, you can write poems that are talking about your community or vulnerable communities. You can write love songs for people. You can share your art. You can make your art available for donation to organizations that you like. There's so much everybody can do. And people talk about how social media is, a lot of people think that it's quite negative, and they feel like people are negative on that. My algorithm is not geared that way at all, because I do follow different charities very closely, and of course animal welfare and animal rescue organizations are prominent in my feeds, so I'm always seeing cute animals, which really helps. But I think that you can do just about anything you set your mind to, as far as being an artist and working towards implementing change in the world. Art sometimes saves the world, even though you don't realize it. Your art that you're making can really help someone stay positive, or feel better, or get motivated. Inspiration comes from the darndest places for people.
Thanks for that. I also just, when you said that, it just made me think, like, when all this started, I saying, you can look at the world in a couple of ways. You can be a victim of it, or you can lean into it and get something amazing done, and contribute in some way and be positive. So I love what you just said. So we have a question from Ida, who said, most of us have turned to creative outlets such as reading, music, art, movies, etc., to keep sane during this pandemic. What do you suggest we do to encourage politicians to spend on the arts when they would look to cut funding? There's an important question. The role of the government in arts.
Well, I always say with politicians, the best thing you can do is call them or write them a letter or at them on social media, because, you know, ultimately, in order for us to have our voices heard, we have to be a pest. You know, we have to, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's our job as citizens, and it's their job to listen. You know, they're there because we put them there, and I think that, you know, in many ways, we don't have to. We feel defensive when we're dealing with politics and politicians. Everybody feels very defensive. They feel because they're anxious about it. They feel like they're not going to be heard, or they feel like someone is going to get upset with them if they don't agree with them. And I always say, it's okay that we don't agree. We don't have to agree. It's just about being heard and people feeling that they're heard. And just because we're heard doesn't mean that change is going to happen that we're asking for. But just even to feel heard and to keep being pests, I think is really important. You know, yes, they're cut, you know, when funding gets cut, it's easy for us to get very impassioned, and I think that's good. I think that we should call them up, write them letters. That's what they're there for, and their job is to listen.
You heard it here. Everyone here should do that, actually. Because
yes, why not?
that is a sector, I think, that is, you know, I don't, and perhaps people haven't thought as much as they could about the impact on the cultural sector and what needs to be done. Literally, I think people have been shut down. Bruce, I mean, charities in general, of course, are affected, some more than others, and you know, it's my view, we share the same thing, that hasn't been enough support for arts and culture in this country, and there should be more, and especially now. The other thing that we're thinking about is, as part of our work at Impact, of course, we've been, you know, for years working with businesses and trying to encourage businesses to contribute to social change. And in the last little while, we've seen some very good examples of businesses pivoting, and some perhaps not so good examples of people not doing enough. Have you had any observations about the role of business in terms of social change at a time like this?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of businesses have stepped up. And when I say stepped up, I mean exactly what Impact is doing. You know, contributing to the greater good of society as a whole. I mean, masks save lives. Yeah. So that's a seriously important work. And you can look at a lot of other local businesses and the things that they are doing. It's hard for any business not to get involved in their own neighborhood, in their own communities. And I think it happens more than we know. I think that everybody right now is, I think people are feeling quite generous, because people are, unfortunately, everyone's getting a forced education in some of the inequality that society has always been facing. But right now it is more glaringly obvious. So it's more noticeable, but people are taking notice. And I have to believe, and I do believe, that that's motivating people and businesses to do more, to do better, and moving forward. As you know, there is a return to normal, which is a saying that is very popular, even though in many ways things will never be the same, but in many ways they shouldn't be the same either. You know, moving forward, and as we do reopen and re-emerge, if you will, I think that it's an opportunity for an evolution, in a way, for many businesses to be more socially conscious and more benevolent.
I love what you just said. People talk about build back better now.
I like that.
What is that? When you think of build back better, what is that? What comes to you? What's in
what's that picture in your mind?
Exactly what we're talking about, where we've got businesses, from small businesses and big businesses, who are now going to have, hopefully, you know, some charity component. And when I say charity, I guess I really mean charitable, more than anything else. I think that that will now be more of a thought, you know, for many companies. And I think, obviously, you know, we all think, you know, those darn mammoth giant companies should be doing more, because we perceive they have more, so they can help more. And I think in many ways that's very accurate. You know, those, like they say, those who have more should help the little guys more. And I think that's a universal way of thinking in every country, every society. It just makes sense. It makes sense. If you have, you know, if you have extra, then you should help those with less.
Yeah, as I said, the hardest thing is we run out of time, and we're coming close to the end of our conversation together, which is such a frustrating thing. I feel like you and I could be chatting all day long. I just had a couple things. Everyone has difficult times, in the best of times, and perhaps especially here. When things are difficult for you, when we're having a hard day, and you're such a positive person, but obviously, like everybody, you have to have times that are not as easy as others. What do you do to make yourself feel like you're living loudly, as you said before?
Well, I think it's actually really normal for a human being to have days that are just that you just feel like garbage. You feel defeated or emotionally exhausted, or like you have nothing more, or even something as simple as you have a migraine, or, you know, or whatever's happening in your own family dynamic, and yet you still have to perform at work. I think that is, and certainly I have experienced that, and I experience that all the time, you know, just like all of us. I think the key is, like they say, you know, it's, again, I blame my parents, you know, from the silly things that they would always tell us to turn that frown upside down, as kind of nonsensical as it sounds. It really does help. And you know, with the exception of if you have a migraine, believe me, because you don't want to do anything except lie there. But you know, ultimately, it's okay to take 10, 20 minutes. And this is like in normal brain health, let's put it that way. You know, you have to give yourself permission to accept those feelings and those days when you just don't have it. You know, it's okay to take a break and take a rest, because yeah, it is emotionally exhausting being a person, just being a person in the world. A lot can happen to a person, all of us. And I think that, you know, being able to be pragmatic, and again, go back to that adaptability and being flexible with ourselves too, with our emotions. I just think it's, you know, as soon as we, you know, kind of just find ourselves at peace with that, and accept the fact that maybe today's not our day, and there's always a morning, not far away, and maybe it'll be a better day tomorrow. You know, always believing that will help you get through anything. Trust me, even cancer.
I love what you just said. There's always a morning, you know?
Always.
It's always there. Bif, thank you so much for having this conversation today. I love speaking with you, and I know everyone else so appreciates everything you have to say. You're just a wonderfully articulate, positive, change maker artist, and who could want more than that? So it's just a real treat.
Thank you for being an inspiration, Paul.
Listen, I just wanted a couple things before we close out. First of all, we're going to hear another song of Bif's. So I want to, that's the most exciting thing, actually. But before we do that, first of all, thanks to Bif. I also want to thank everyone at Impact for contributing to Change for Good, which is, that's the thing. That's the reason why we're all here today, I think. And so really
means a lot to me. Also, just wanted to, I think it's shared on the screen, but in case you didn't get it, this is in recognition of Bif's appearance here today. We are, the Impact Foundation for Social Change is going to, oh, my dog is just grumbling and growling on the floor here. I just went, anyway, threw me off for a second. But the Impact Foundation for Social Change exists to help marginalized people to be employed. But we've got a campaign to raise $100,000 to ensure that the 26,000 seniors who are at high risk in their communities get face masks they need. So I really hope everyone will go to the impactfoundation.ca, and I think it's on the screen here, face.masks, and you can make a donation. Anything you could do would be so much appreciated by those seniors and by us, of course. As I said, we're going to play another song of yours called Spaceman, which I love this song.
Me too.
So tell us about Spaceman, and we're going to listen to it. But how did you come to write that song, and what does that mean to you today?
Spaceman really was just being written about wanting to escape. It's a song about escapism and basically dreaming of being able to escape your circumstances. And I think that we've all experienced that, which is why the song has remained popular to this day. Take me away, Spaceman is the wish, but you could insert anything for the Spaceman.
Right on, let's hear it. Spaceman.
Almost every day in magazines and on the big screen, close yet far away. Remember that night
Awesome.
Thank you. You can't say more than that. Said it
Awesome.
all. Thank you, Bif.
Thank you for everything.
Till next time. Have a great day. And a great morning.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.